I've wanted to talk about this companion for a long time now. I actually remember the exact scene that convinced me I needed to make this video, although I obviously won't disclose which scene that was until much later in this video. Dan is a weird companion, and I don't think he's been discussed nearly enough. For those who don't know, either because you don't watch Doctor Who or gave up on the show earlier in the Chibnall era, in which case I don't blame you, Dan was brought into the show exclusively during the Flux season, and for a few short specials afterwards. It was the last season show ran by Chibnall, and one with a different format to usual, with a more direct overarching plot. Most of this I'm not going to discuss, because most of this doesn't involve Dan, and this isn't a Doctor Who video, it's a Dan video. I'll be covering basically every scene Dan appears in, excluding the ones that are basically just exposition, which don't really tell us much about him as a person. Anyway, that's pretty much it, so let's get started on the first real Dan episode. Fun fact, when I first wrote this script, I said this was the first scene of the Flux era. Then I realized there was a couple scenes before it that I just forgot about because Dan wasn't in them. Anyway, the first important scene of the Flux era is set in the Museum of Liverpool, where we learn our first Dan fact. He loves Liverpool.
Nobody has got a top floor like the Museum of Liverpool, because nobody has got our history.
This will remain one of Dan's primary and most consistent character traits. We also meet Dan's love interest, a woman working at the museum who reveals that he does this often. Despite not being employed, he's just that passionate about Liverpool. This may seem inconsequential, but Dan's knowledge of Liverpool history will be pivotal to the resolution of this series, and part of me wonders if that's a coincidence. Anyway, then a bunch of stuff happens with these girls, I don't know, I don't get it. We then get some scenes developing Dan's character. Nothing important really, just some minor details, like the fact that he's ageist.
Trick or treat.
How old are you? What's the difference? You're not even dressed up.
Then we finally get into the sci-fi portion of the show.
Yes, gaze upon my might.
What is it with you lot tonight? You're paying for that door, you know.
So this large humanoid dog bursts down his door and enters his house, and Dan's still treating them like a trick-or-treater.
Well, you've definitely put the effort in.
Which leads to my first real piece of evidence. I think Dan's far more knowledgeable and powerful than he's letting on. Because even if this was just a trick-or-treater, Dan's still not really reacting to the fact that he just broke into his house. We also see that Dan can't be affected by Jedi mind tricks.
You will not resist. You will do exactly as I command.
Don't think I will.
Why's that not working?
This is properly forgotten and never brought up by the writers again. He never uses it again, it never works, he never figures out why it didn't work on Dan, so I assume he was just too powerful. Anyway, Dan then lets himself get kidnapped, presumably out of pity. After he gets captured, these two women enter his house, where we learn that 7 billion more dog people are showing up. Also, his house gets shrunk. A couple scenes later, we see that even while kidnapped, he still doesn't really care.
You wait till I get out of here.
Why? What are you going to do?
I'm going to report you. That space.
I mean, I should just kill you. Yeah, I could. Right here.
Yeah, but you haven't though, have you? If you've gone to all this trouble to kidnap me, killing me wouldn't make sense.
A few scenes later, one of those women from earlier appears to help him out, which he seems a bit concerned over.
Well, I don't know, I can trust you. You might be with the dog fella.
Does this look like a face you can trust?
Maybe.
Maybe.
There's a few possible reasons for this. Either he's acting normal to try and infiltrate the Doctor's ranks, or he already had 46 different escape plans prepared and didn't want her ruining anything. It could also be that she's from Sheffield, which isn't Liverpool.
I'm Yaz. Yasmin Khan, formerly PC Yasmin Khan of Hallamshire Police.
Hallamshire what? Like Sheffield?
Why, what's the matter with Sheffield?
Two near Leeds.
At this point in the episode, the writers attempt to make Dan seem less important than he clearly is. Likely because the writers felt they were being too on the nose. In case you were wondering why the dogman kidnapped him, it's not because of Dan's omnipotent powers and being too dangerous to be left alive.
Why are you doing this? What's so special about me?
Nothing. There's nothing special about you.
It's because an entire species of dogmen has come to Earth, for some reason, I think involving the apocalypse, and each has a designated human to protect. However, this dogman hits a time distortion and arrives sooner.
You're moving away from Earth while the rest are travelling towards it.
My ship hit a time disturbance at the head of the battalion. It meant I got to Earth a few hours ahead of the others.
I don't buy this, at all. At no point do we see any other dogmen capture people. There's clearly something special about Dan, whether the dogmen realize it or not. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to discuss something other than Dan for a second. I know, just give me a second. The TARDIS, for those who don't know, is the ship the Doctor travels in. From the outside, it looks like an old police telephone box, but on the inside, it's way bigger. I bring this up because most companions react to this in the exact same way.
It's bigger on the inside.
Is it? I noticed.
At least in the new show. In the old show, it was a bit more diverse.
But it was a police telephone box. I walked all round it.
But this is such a staple of renewed Doctor Who that when the companion gave a mildly different answer, the Doctor was surprised.
Smaller on the outside.
Okay. That is a first.
And when they don't react that way, there's good reason for it.
After what happened with Prisoner Zero, I've been reading up on all the latest scientific theories. FTL travel, parallel universes.
I like the bit when someone says it's bigger on the inside.
At this point, I'm just going to briefly describe who the Doctor is, just in case someone doesn't know. They're an alien who regenerates when near death, taking on a new appearance and a somewhat different personality. So if you're confused by why I'm showing a bunch of different people and acting like they're all the Doctor, they are all the Doctor, so shut up. Now, with all that said, let's see how Dan reacts.
You said it was a ship, that's not a ship!
Get in! Why have you put the door in the floor?
Bit of a daft place to have a door, isn't it?
Now, admittedly, he's quite right. That is a silly place to put a door. For the record, for anyone who isn't really a fan of Doctor Who, it usually isn't there. However, not only does he hardly react to the size of the TARDIS,
So all this inside that box?
It's bigger on the inside.
I can see that.
but in order to enter the TARDIS through that door, there'd have to be some level of gravity distortion, which he also doesn't react to at all. He's had by far the most weird experience entering the TARDIS out of any companion in Doctor Who history, and yet one of the most subdued reactions. Additionally, there's also this mind-blowing line.
It's called a TARDIS.
I had a mate who had one of these. I think his was a bit bigger, actually.
Shut up.
No, Yaz, please let him continue. Sure, that obviously could have been a joke, but based on what we've seen from him so far, and especially considering what we'll see from him in the future, do you really expect me to buy that? Anyway, Dan finds out his house has been shrunk.
By the way, here's your house.
What? How did that happen?
Carvanista set a trap up for us, which miniaturised it.
I can't live in that.
Once again, he's not really fussed. And that's pretty much it for this episode. However, it's also worth noting that Dan's love interest gets kidnapped. So there's no denying he's important now, right? There's no reason for them to kidnap this woman in particular, other than to get at Dan. She doesn't have any significance to the Doctor, so it has to be for him. Anyway, that's it for this episode.
Only Imperial Stormtroopers.
Episode 2 of The Flux is another I'd consider a keystone episode for Dan. In the first episode, there's obviously a lot of focus on him because he's being introduced, but in this episode he's still a main focal point. This episode starts in the Crimean War. Although Dan doesn't stay here long, he does have one interesting line.
They're fighting Sontarans.
She's like a real person from history.
You just talked to her, didn't you?
And those Sontaran things, they're not part of history.
This demonstrates further that Dan wasn't giving tours at the museum because he likes history, he did it because he likes Liverpool history. Anything not happening in Liverpool, he seemingly couldn't care less about, to the extent that he had to ask whether or not Sontarans were actually a part of human history. He's then sent back to a few days after the events of the previous episode. For some reason, I don't know, I wasn't listening. Soon after returning, and discovering that Earth is subject to a Sontaran invasion, which has conveniently started in Liverpool, Dan dodges lasers from a platoon of Sontaran warriors.
Curfew defier! Breach of curfew or result in instant execution! Shooters apprehended! Defend cover! All escape route!
Only Imperial Stormtroopers are so precise.
I want to obviously use this as evidence of Dan being super powerful, but this seems to happen a lot in the Chibnall era. Then again, usually Dan is present for those scenes, so maybe that is something to consider. Perhaps he's deflecting the lasers somehow. Fortunately, only 2 pursue him further, and they're taken out by Dan's parents, which is interesting because up until now I assumed Dan just created himself one day when he felt like it.
Where the hell have you been?
Do pay attention to the mother, by the way. She will be coming up later, for very important reasons. We learn some interesting stuff from both Dan's parents. First, we learn they also aren't fussed over Dan's house disappearing.
Hey lad, did someone nick your house?
Sort of.
Secondly, we learn that the Sontarans only arrived days earlier,
Same day you vanished. What's that? 2 days ago now?
which conflicts with what the people in Crimea said about them always being around.
How long have they been here, the Sontarans?
They've always been here.
Occupying the entirety of Russia's borders at the time. This implies either Dan's parents are also superpowered and are capable of remembering real history before it was changed, or the writers don't understand time travel. Personally, I'm going to assume it's the former, partially because these are the people who allegedly brought Dan into the world, and partially because the idea of writers on a show about time travel having no idea how to write time travel is just silly. We also learn that they know the Sontaran weakness. It's this, by the way, if you hit this with any level of force, it just kind of knocks them over. They claim they learned it when some guy in Birkenhead hit a Sontaran there by accident.
Who found that out?
Oh, fella in Birkenhead.
He was drunk, with a mallet.
Big
Birkenhead.
But at the same time, his mother knows part of the scientific name for it,
Probig something.
Yeah, alright, Eileen. Only to get all medical.
leaving me to believe they're simply omniscient. Why on earth would the Sontarans let them know the official name for it? Speaking of which, they also clearly shared Dan's bravery as they drive past curfew directly towards the main Sontaran base of operations. At this point, Dan says he's going in alone, since he'll be stealthier that way.
I've had some experience of dealing with aliens these last few days.
Normal parents would probably have a lot to say about this, but this is Dan's parents, so after showing some mild concern, they hand him a walk and wish him good luck. Dan does show some concern over seeing humans get executed, which is good. While Dan's power is evident, I was unsure if he was planning on using it for good or evil. Anyway, Dan proceeds to infiltrate the base. For some shocking reason, the Sontaran handbreeders also respond to humans. I was going to list this as a Dan feat, but the Doctor does this as well, despite being centuries in the past, so I instead assumed the Sontarans are simply stupid. Anyway, Dan then stumbles upon the means of contacting the Doctor in the past.
Is it bad just to press things? Hopefully they won't self-destruct. Don't let anybody know that I'm here.
You may be wondering how this works, since they're in separate centuries. I'm sure you could justify the Sontarans having time travel technology advanced enough to transmit live messages across time. But considering the level of competence we've seen from them so far, I'm going to take the Occam's razor approach, and assume it works because Dan's bending reality around him. It just seems more likely to me. During this conversation, the Doctor attempts to take data from Dan's phone, which worries him somewhat, making me wonder what he has to hide.
Plus, everything that's on your phone.
What? Include me photos?
He is then tasked with taking on all the Sontarans in the present. This is a hefty task, but clearly the Doctor knows who to trust with it. We then get yet another showing of Dan's incredible wits.
I'm just a tourist. That's your boss, your commander, like, there he is.
They always have to face their enemies in battle. Isn't that brilliant? They can never turn their back.
We stare into the face of death!
Alright, lads. I was just looking for the pyramid.
Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, his dog friend comes to save him, knowing how important he is to the fabric of reality. His dog friend then comes up with a way of destroying the fleet, or at least that's what we're led to believe. But considering this scene,
I've got a plan. What do you mean, you know?
I intercepted the transmissions. It's not your plan, so don't pretend you're clever.
I'm starting to think that Dan has the power to transmit ideas into other people's heads. The episode basically ends there. I mean, there's some other stuff, like Dan and dog friend escaping through the waste disposal, but honestly there aren't really many Dan moments from this point. Other than him, unsurprisingly, defeating all the Sontarans. Tragically, the next several episodes all have far less to cover. Don't get me wrong, there's absolutely more evidence of Dan's immense power in them. It's just a bit less frequent. Don't worry though, once we get past the rest of the Flux and get to the post-Flux specials, that's when we'll truly see the extent of Dan's power when he doesn't hold back. The next episode almost entirely consists of the characters reliving memories in their own time streams. I'm sure that came out from left field for anyone watching this, but this is actually set up at the very end of the last episode, and through an entire subplot of the last episode. Tragically, Dan wasn't a major factor in either, so I didn't mention them. Don't get too excited though, Dan's memories are tragically uninsightful, other than learning that he got left at the altar.
Says she'd been thinking about it properly, couldn't bear spending the rest of her life with me, so...
I guess if they've shown too much here, it'll become too obvious he's more than human. The only things really of note in this episode are his confidence.
Then we have disrupted the flow of time, however briefly.
No, you haven't. And we're going to stop you, right? Right, Doctor?
Dan Lewis.
And the fact that, yes, they did kidnap the woman specifically to get at him.
We have something of yours.
Where am I now?
Die.
This is incredibly interesting, because Dan wasn't a companion of the Doctor before this, so the villains knowing leverage against him would be important tells me they considered him a threat even before he met the Doctor, which means they must be pretty smart. In the next episode, they're in the past. Then they encounter a weeping angel, a creature that only moves when unobserved and can send creatures it touches back in time, which ends up sending them even further into the past. The only really noteworthy thing that happens before this is this scene. I don't know what to comment on here. I just found it pretty funny how neither of them are backing up through this. I have to assume, based on this, that Dan at least wanted to be sent back into the past. Most of what happens for the rest of this episode is, once again, quite uninsightful. However, there is this one scene, which I think proves Dan chose to be sent to the past, because now he's capable of single-handedly keeping the angel at bay, while the other two have a conversation while not looking at it. My only other takeaway from this episode is I take back what I said about Dan seeming to have compassion, because he doesn't really seem to care about the others being trapped in the past.
Sorry, who are you?
Mate, it's a long story. Unfortunately, you've got enough time to hear it.
That's pretty much it for this episode. Okay, fine, there's one more thing I absolutely have to discuss. I haven't brought up either of these characters because honestly they contribute nothing to the Daniverse, but I just have to show you this scene.
There's not much duration in these, so I'll be quick. Only one chance at recording too. High stakes. Oh, coordinates. So I'm heading to... Oh, no, don't run away! No.
Absolutely the best post-credit scene I've ever seen. 10 out of 10. The following episode and a half are interesting, because Dan and Yaz are now completely separated from the Doctor, for what in-universe amounts to years. This means Dan will need to use even more of his unlimited power to keep the two useless idiots alive. Of course, he's still hiding behind the facade of a bumbling moron, but we all know it's him keeping them alive. I didn't really pay attention to this part because it has more to do with the Doctor than Dan, but I believe they're trying to decipher a message from the Doctor, which she left even further into the past to get them on the right track, including a message written on Mayan pottery, which they then go to the Ottoman Empire to get translated. Seems like they probably could have done that somewhere closer than Constantinople, but oh well. Anyway, Yaz allegedly saves the group from a bomb, but I'm still not entirely sure it wasn't Dan. Regardless though, someone's definitely trying to stop them. Another assassin is later sent after them on a boat. They beat him up, and Dan threatens to bite their toes off. Why this was the first thought he had in this situation, I don't know. The man kills himself, knowing that Dan isn't bluffing and not wanting to be alive when Dan gets hungry. We then get one of the worst scenes in Doctor Who history.
Took you long enough? I'm sorry? To get up here. I've been watching you for days. So, what's the gossip? Who's kissed who? Gossip?
I would say it has some redeeming qualities, because Dan's right there, but he doesn't even speak much, so I'm not sure there are any.
I'm teasing you! I knew you wouldn't have anything, really. Do you have anything for us? No.
Really?
I'm teasing you again! Fetch your dog!
They follow the monk's advice and call Dan's dog, by desecrating an ancient landmark. Somehow, nobody notices this until Dan's dog sees it over a century later. Again, this must be because of Dan. There's no way the writers of this time travel show don't know how to write time travel. We then finally get to one of the key points that made me suspect Dan's more than he leads on.
You're Joseph Williams. Well, who else would I be, sir? And it seems I must find my own way out of this infernal puzzle. Those cursed shifting doorways. He's gone. How did he do that? Joseph Williamson. If he keeps turning up in all these different places and times, we've got to find him. That's where we have to go.
You got that right. Dan's specific knowledge of Liverpool, and exclusively Liverpool, is a vital aspect of the plot, and the ability for the companions to meet back up with the Doctor. There's no way this is a coincidence, right? Don't get me wrong, I know there have to be some contrivances to let the companions know things and let them contribute to the show, but after all we've seen from Dan, I'm starting to find this hard to believe. Let's also keep in mind, the only reason he is here on this adventure that completely centers around history of his local area is because he was abducted by a dogman who was tasked with capturing him, who specifically happened to hit a time distortion, which made his ship arrive earlier than the rest. And from what we see, he's the only one who captures anyone. I just don't buy it. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Other than this sign I found funny, which referred to death rays of death.
I intended the dire death ray to be used for good, not evil.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. The finale of the Flux also doesn't have much Dan stuff. I mean, in the last episode he effectively reunited the companions and Doctor successfully, so I can't blame him. By the way, I don't think I ever explained that. So yeah, the Doctor basically just teleports into the tunnels where they also are. I don't really get it. I think it's explained in the scene where Dan isn't present, so I'm basically as clueless as you are. Anyway, if he had kept up that level of competence, they'd basically have to rename the show at that point. He still has some moments, but they're pretty minor. There's also this scene.
Your delicious and appealing mouth snacks wrapped in paper will never weaken us or our resolve. We are invulnerable. Maybe 3 more.
Which makes me feel like I owe the last scene I disliked an apology. This is easily the worst scene I can think of.
Chocolate.
There isn't much else of note in this episode related to Dan though, which is why I'm skipping straight to the end, like as in after the threat's been dealt with. Don't worry, Dan doesn't get too involved here. He mostly lets the Doctor shine for now. All that's worth mentioning is that his love interest still seems mad at him, even though she is fully aware that he was busy being kidnapped by space dogs, and he's now continuing to travel with the Doctor. As the first special begins, Dan confronts his greatest challenge yet, being sent to a city in England outside of Liverpool.
Manchester.
4 places.
Even after the Doctor brings up temporal disturbances, this still seems to be his main concern.
Temporal disturbance.
Max. You hear, Max? You should understand.
Anyway, then they encounter a Dalek, the first one Dan's ever seen.
Why are you killing these people?
Why, you have met us before, yes? It's kind of our main thing.
Daleks are an incredibly violent and aggressive race of aliens. They're most well known for driving around in salt shakers and using their plunger arms to attack people. That said, they're also incredibly dangerous, or at least they have been for the entire revival of the show, which will come up later. The Daleks are also generally quite smart, and they've come up with their greatest plan yet. they've stuck the Doctor in a time loop, knowing that by taking away the agency of her dying being a big deal, they've also taken away her plot armor.
Anyone else got a proper deja vu?
No, the story never directly states this, but if this isn't the case, the Daleks have simply given the Doctor several second chances by creating a time loop, so they're morons. The group seems somewhat confused by what's happening until the next loop. But before that, we learn that maybe the Daleks are just stupid, because they don't see Dan as a threat.
So we're dead. Second time round.
The inferior human is correct.
Who you calling inferior?
You?
They'll learn to regret this. Anyway, on the next loop, they get the memo.
Time. Groundhog Day. Same difference.
Props to Dan for giving it its proper scientific name. On this loop, the group manages to avoid a barrage of laser fire alongside these two nobodies I'll bring up more in the future, which I assume is because Dan's deflecting the lasers, because otherwise, even if the Dalek was blind, statistically one of these bolts would hit something. Then one of the two nobodies, this one, gets them trapped inside a storage room, which the others berate him for, so I guess even they realize they could have just kept running and not been hit. Dan readies an ironer and whatever this is to fight the Dalek off, and honestly, if the Doctor didn't intervene at this point, I think this would have been the end of the story. But tragically, the Doctor convinces them to kill themselves instead. Other than the black guy, he does it without even being talked into it.
This is where I keep stuff for women I split up with, just in case they ever ask for it back.
You're the reason that I'm trapped in a time loop. Just throw stuff away! No.
You can take me, just let them go.
Because this woman's the worst, as I'll also cover later. It really seems like the Daleks sent their worst marksman. Speaking of which, Dan needs to buy the Doctor and Yaz time, as they realize there's now a second Dalek.
If I manage to stay alive, I'll see you up there. If not, I'll see you in the next loop. So it better be a next loop.
Which means he'll have to take one on himself.
Identify!
I've got some stuff I need stored and I just wanted to see what was available.
Daleks do not store stuff.
You're in the wrong job then, aren't you? What kind of a welcome is that?
Daleks do not have managers.
Well, maybe that's part of your problem.
Analysis concludes this is a delaying tactic.
Took you long enough.
Exterminate!
I don't know if you're going to believe me, but this wasn't even the moment that I realized Dan was a deity. There's a moment in a future episode even more insane than this. This sort of thing I probably wouldn't have bat my eye at in a very early Doctor Who episode, but in Modern Who, this is just comical. The best part is Dan has to stand still to let the Dalek hit him, and he doesn't even look tired. If he wanted to, he could have done that till midnight. The Doctor thinks the loop will end at midnight, by the way. I don't think she has any evidence for this, maybe she just knows this is a New Year's special. Anyway, now Dan's dead for this loop, so let's skip to the next one. In the next loop, okay, I'm sorry, but I need to discuss something other than Dan for a minute or two. I know I've done this already, but it's really necessary here. He doesn't really do much this loop. In this loop, this woman is eager to run off without a doctor, and explains that since the guy has always seemed to die before the specific minute mark, she believes he will die within the next minute, permanently this loop, as each loop starts a minute into the future.
I don't care if he's a weirdo. And he is a weirdo, you know, but he's decent.
They play the sweet music to try and convince us their relationship is something to care about. But really, while this guy is honestly quite charming, this character has just been the worst this entire episode.
I can fix this. But then why haven't you? You haven't done a very good job so far, have you?
Oi, I don't see you coming up with solutions.
Yeah, because it's not my fault, is it? It's hers.
Especially to him.
Just throw stuff away!
Anyway, the Doctor convinces her to stay and runs off herself, which brings us here. Okay, Chibnall, I know these Daleks look like robots, but they aren't actually, as you yourself explained earlier in this episode.
The robot isn't a robot, it's a Dalek. It's a living, mutant creature inside weaponized battle transport.
So why are you writing them to be morons? Maybe some of Dan's magic is rubbing off on him? Or maybe he's also a deity? Regardless, this isn't even the reason for this Dan mission, if you could believe it.
So what did you do?
It was a lot of strategic analysis, weapons assessment, and battle-ready thinking.
Did you duck?
Yeah.
Nice.
The doctor and this guy run back to the group, and the woman's still being the worst.
You saved him.
Saved myself, actually.
Yeah, no, what really happened?
And then the doctor gives a dramatic speech about life or something, and talks them into waiting a loop, and they die. Now, there's a reason I discussed this loop, despite it hardly including Dan. Keep in mind, based on the doctor's logic, this loop should be about 5 minutes. This first conversation, where the woman's trying to rush off because the guy has less than a minute to live, it lasts for 2 minutes. By her logic, he would have died halfway through this conversation because she had to make it long and draw it out. The doctor then grabs the man, who's still alive, no thanks to this idiot. Counting only the seconds the doctor's on screen to avoid any overlap with the previous scene, this lasts for 25 seconds. Let's be generous and say it's a very short walk from here to where the other scene is happening, and say that in total this only takes 30 seconds. When they return to the rest of the group, we then get a 3.5 minute conversation. In this story, where there's an extremely tight time limit, on this loop, which based on the doctor's previous assessment should only last 5 minutes, they spend 5.5 minutes basically wasting time and talking about what they'll do on the next loop, which will be a minute shorter.
We have 4 minutes.
And have all the Daleks back possibly.
They're not coming back.
They will, because the fact that there's 2 of them means they've found a way of keeping inside the time loop.
When so far they've killed 2 of them, and they have a pair of conversations so long that by the logic of the episode, it shouldn't have even been able to happen, because midnight should have happened a minute ago. And I was being very generous with the amount of time it would take for the doctor and the guy to return to the group. Good lord, man. Anyway, back to the Dan moments. Okay, no, never mind. I need to quickly show you this. How did the Doctor not anticipate the Daleks also adapting themselves? Anyway, now we can finally return to the Dan show.
Have you ever told her?
Told her what?
How you feel about her?
In this scene, Dan reveals he's found out that Diaz has romantic feelings for the Doctor, before she herself seems to have come to terms with it. This is yet another example of Dan being omniscient, because there are absolutely no hint of this romance before this point, other than this fairly brief scene in the last episode. It was also foreshadowed in this scene, but there was just so much else to talk about there.
My friend Lauren actually says that good-hearted weirdos are actually the keepers. So...
What? Is it that obvious?
Well, maybe not to a good-hearted weirdo. You didn't half came looking at that hologram.
She didn't what?
You didn't half came looking at that hologram.
I don't think you're allowed to say that on the BBC network. Guess the rules are just different when you're Dan.
Dan?
It's a shame the Doctor didn't brief Yaz on what to do in a Dalek scenario.
Don't move.
This is what you do in a T-Rex scenario.
There's one behind you, Yaz.
In a Dalek scenario, when there's a Dalek on each side of you, you just duck, as the Doctor herself is aware of.
Did you duck?
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, skipping to the next loop now that the main character's dead, for some reason, the lights are still on in various places. But the Daleks definitely cut the lights within the first minutes of the last loop. Additionally, unfortunately, this woman's still alive, despite dying very early in the last loop. To be fair, this was never really directly stated by the story, this was just this woman's theory.
That's right, isn't it?
The Doctor seems pretty convinced though. But it does show the Daleks are completely relying on the idea of killing them all off in the last loop, rather than being able to pick them off one by one, making this plan of theirs even more contrived.
Just bring them down here. Sorry. No time.
I love how they have to write the Doctor to be more polite now, even though this is a high-stakes scenario, to help build up the romance. Okay, sorry, I know this has nothing to do with Dan, who, may I just say, has still been killing us. He's even trying to set the two up even now.
She likes you.
I like her too.
No, I mean, she likes you.
Which shows just how little he cares about the danger they're in. Anyway, the Doctor spends this 3-minute loop setting up a plan. Next loop, they'll throw the Daleks off by doing things they don't actually plan on doing for the last loop. Then after that, on the actual last loop, they'll actually go through with the Doctor's plan she's been making. Quite smart actually. However, this is how the Doctor, Dan and Yaz spend their decoy loop.
Locating the Doctor.
Hey, do you want to join?
Explain.
Oh, just have some beef and beans.
I mean, I know this isn't actually what you're going to be doing on the last loop, but you could have made it a bit more convincing. Now the Daleks will know this is a decoy loop, unless they're really stupid. Anyway, now they're on the last loop. I'm not going to cover all of this in detail because most of it doesn't pertain to Dan, but the Daleks are comically inept on this last loop.
Only Imperial Stormtroopers.
Yeah, I'm sure the humans are hiding in that box that you previously saw had fireworks. Nothing else could possibly be in there. Anyway, that's pretty much where the episode ends, with these two realizing their love for each other, and the Doctor and Yaz, well, I'm not really sure to be honest, but it doesn't really pertain to Dan, so I'm just going to ignore it. Apparently this is meant to be a happy ending. Personally, I would have found this one much more fulfilling, but to each their own, I guess.
It's beginning to look a lot like fishmen.
In the next episode, the Doctor wasn't aiming for a beach, yet Dan is fully prepped in pirate gear.
We finally got to a beach. Yeah, when we weren't aiming for one.
And yes, as it turns out, this is a pirate episode. He also didn't just put it on, since Yaz started the episode telling him to hurry up.
Dan, hurry up!
I'm actually not sure how to interpret this. I mean, yeah, on one hand, Dan is certainly omniscient, and he easily could have known that there would be pirates in this episode, but on the other hand, he claims Yaz told him to dress like this, and she claims this is the case as well.
But she gave me.
Yes, did you just stand up like this?
She said nautical would suit me.
I can't leave you alone for a second. At least you didn't bring the hook.
Is she omniscient? Did she take some of his powers while they were spending time together over those many years? Or is he controlling her somehow? Keep in mind, in the second episode of the Flux, I did posit the idea that he could possibly put ideas in others' heads. So is it possible he put the idea of getting Yaz to tell him to dress like a pirate in her head? There's so much to consider here. Anyway, as they head down the beach to this nearby fishing village, they encounter this fish guy.
Why are you trashing this place?
Who are you?
I'm the Doctor. No!
When on earth did they coordinate this? Is this yet another example of Dan putting ideas in other people's heads?
What is that?
You think such feeble material can hold me?
That's impossible.
It's a good thing he decided to run off like that, considering they were all unarmed and he could have easily just killed them. Well, other than Dan obviously, but he doesn't know that. Further into the village, they encounter this pirate lady and this guy whose dad just died. The pirate lady was looking for information about a treasure she's hunting. We then get yet another piece of massive Dan lore.
Must be some treasure.
The lost treasure of the Flor de la Mar is worth any amount of statues.
The Flor de la Mar? I thought that went down off the coast of Sumatra.
Okay, so that's it, right? There's no way that Dan isn't hiding anything. What they're discussing here is a Portuguese carrack, which got lost off the coast of Sumatra, an island in Indonesia. Now, I did some googling to fact check this, and as far as I'm aware, neither Indonesia or Portugal are inside Liverpool. Therefore, Dan just stated a historical fact that it has nothing to do with Liverpool. This is deeply out of character for the character he's been building, and it really tells me that there's more to him than meets the eye, and that he's trying to hide something. Anyway, then Dan wanders off with this guy, even though he was told directly by the Doctor not to wander off.
You're supposed to wander off.
This is because he knows that he's smarter than the Doctor, so whatever he has planned is better. Then some stuff without Dan happens, and then next time we see them, Dan and this guy are on the boat, which was already sailing off by the time that they decided to start swimming. This shows that they're both incredibly powerful. The guy he swam with also seems powerful, and even acknowledges Dan's power, showing that he's quite smart as well.
You must be pretty good at fighting if you've survived to be. 70? 60? 42?
Dan stutters here when trying to say his age. I believe this is because he's lying and is actually centuries if not millennia old, and simply doesn't want to disclose this fact with some random nobody. They are then kidnapped by the pirate lady. Dan points out that she could use a crew.
I'm no expert, and I don't know how many crew you should have on here, but surely 3's better than 1.
You think you're so clever?
The pirate mocks him for this, claiming that he is unintelligent, but then immediately agrees with him.
If I let you live, you work the ship, do as I say.
This is because she doesn't want to hurt her own ego, but knows that Dan is significantly smarter than her. We then hardly see them for about 10 minutes, so I'm just going to skip to the next scene with him.
Man the cannons.
We learn here that Dan knows how to man cannons, which I'd say is pretty impressive, but I don't know, maybe that's common knowledge. Then there's another 10 tragically Danless minutes. Don't worry though, we'll be seeing plenty of him soon enough.
That's impossible.
Doctor, yes? Is that your ship?
As they're reunited, we learn that the Doctor has come to terms with Dan's immense power.
Where's the crew?
Well, that'll be us. We don't stand a chance.
Hi, that's Dan. No, just Dan. Dan's my mate.
Yeah.
I was wondering how long it'll take a genius like the Doctor to figure this out. Back in the second episode of Flux, she did basically trust him with the fate of the world, but it's nice to see her state it directly. The Sea Devil then takes this stone from this guy for some reason. He also doesn't kill him, which again I don't really understand. The group then gets back on the ship. I say back because that's where the Doctor and Yaz were, by the way. We don't see exactly how they managed this though.
With me. I know what you're doing.
This must be for one of two reasons. Either they didn't want to show us directly Dan teleporting or flying the group back onto the ship, or the writers have given up a long time ago. I'll leave it to you to decide which is the correct answer. It's the first one, by the way. Of course it's the first one. The group, or the crew as the Doctor puts it,
We're just a crew. From a ship. Looking for adventure.
because she just can't stop giving the group cringy names, isn't that right fam, then gets into a large sword fight. In this fight, we see the leader of the Sea Devils disarm the Doctor, who probably hasn't had much practice since being the third Doctor, but we know that she was at one point a decent sword fighter. So at the very least, we know the leader of the Sea Devils is a pretty good sword fighter. This will come up soon. In this sword fight, Dan saves Yaz from one of the Sea Devils using the hook of his pirate costume, once again proving his omniscience and incredible power, that he was able to manage this with a prop, and that he had the foresight to bring it. Speaking of which, here he claims he knew this would come in handy. Whereas previously, he had acted like Yaz set him up for the entire costume. This implies that he had planned to bring the hook from the start, and perhaps he had put that idea in Yaz's head. He then saves her again moments later with an even bigger hook. Perhaps they are his signature weapon.
How'd you like me pirate moves?
Better than your outfit.
Come on.
Dan and Yaz then run further into the ship as the rest fight off the remaining Sea Devils. We learn here that the Doctor still values these Sea Devils' lives. Once again, this will come up later. Dan then gives Yaz further romantic advice which, look, I love Dan as much as the next guy, but is this really the one thing he should be giving her advice on?
I was engaged to get married 2 days before. She changed her mind.
If there's one thing Dan's bad at, it's romance. I really don't think he should be giving her any advice here. Then the Doctor arrives and does something quite drastic for this version of the character. She entrusts him with a sword, one which has been shown to be an instant kill if it at all touches someone. She asks him to use it only if he absolutely has to, and to help the others keep the Sea Devils away from the Doctor. This is a lot of trust the Doctor's giving him. In the next Dan scene, Dan briefly gives Ji-Hun authority over the other two while he goes to check something out. Ji-Hun is an ancient pirate that was kept in suspended animation, by the way. He showed up in a non-Dan scene, so I didn't really get to mention him. After Ji-Hun sends the other two away, Dan returns talking about how they have company.
Wait, where are the other two gone?
With only the 2 of them remaining, and 5 Sea Devils approaching, the group has no options other than to surrender. Or at least that would be the case. But in case you didn't notice, this is Dan.
With a grudge, he'll take you out before you even blink.
Okay, so I know that scene happened fast, but in case you didn't notice, Ji-hun, the ancient pirate who actually probably knows some swordsmanship, did nothing in that scene. He simply ducked out of Dan's way while he handled all 5 of the Sea Devils in 2 sword strokes. Then, when even Ji-hun acknowledges how insanely out of character this was,
Where did you learn to deal with your enemies like that?
Dan simply states that his mother taught him.
You should meet me, Mum.
You get it now, right? You get why I had to make this video? Why is nobody else talking about this? Breaking character for a second, a lot of what I've discussed can be, to some extent, ascribed to the other characters as well, which is likely down to the poor writing, but this is exclusively for Dan. And they expect me to believe this is just some regular guy from Liverpool? I mean, I've never been to Liverpool, maybe this is just how people over there act, but I doubt it. Part of me wonders if the world was too desensitized from the previous Dan antics to really realize just how crazy this scene is. If any other companion did this, it'll be talked about for ages, but when Dan does it, no one seems to notice. Almost as if this is expected behaviour for him. Anyway, he does pretty much nothing else for the rest of the episode because why would he? How could he possibly top what he just did? The only information that pertains to Dan for the rest of this story is that his love interest wants to get back together with him.
I think I might have been missing seeing you.
Personally, I think this is because he filmed what he did to those 5 Sea Devils and sent that to her. It'll work on me at least. We tragically get very little of Dan in this episode, and frankly, even if this episode was filled with Dan, how could we possibly top what we just saw in the last episode? Perhaps Dan himself realized this, because he chooses to leave the group permanently quite early into this episode. From the beginning of this episode, he is generally whining and seems a bit more cowardly than usual.
What are we doing? I've got dates to get to.
This is incredibly out of character for him, and personally, I think he's just trying to buy excuses to leave the group. As they're infiltrating the train, there's a space train by the way, I forgot to mention that, something insane happens.
Number 2, don't get shot!
After all these episodes with the worst marksman of all time, you seriously expect me to believe this one cyberlord knew what they were doing? I refuse to believe it. Dan leant into that laser beam, because clearly he was just looking for excuses to leave the group, and he knew he would survive anyway. He's Dan, how could he possibly die? This is further compounded by the fact that, now that he's dangling up in the air, where the Cybermen could more easily shoot him, they don't. This is clearly because Dan reactivates his force field, which he's been using to prevent laser beams from hitting him in the previous episodes. By the way, I just realized this as I was editing this, just to illustrate how bad these guys are at shooting. This one Cyberlord shoots another one as they're flying through the air. This is clearly some manipulation by Dan. It's also worth noting that his helmet got hit straight in the middle, and yet he's completely unharmed, further proving this. After they arrive on the train, Dan mostly remains calm. However, once the adventure is completed, he talks to the doctor.
You don't have to come back for me. I was one hand away from flying off into space and suffocating. I don't want to push my luck any further.
I think he's being entirely dishonest here. He's experienced far worse in the past, but do you really expect me to think that he gave up now? Well, okay. There is one line from him, which I think might be one of the most truthful things he's ever said.
But it's not my life. I need to get back to it. I need to attack it. And I can now. Because I've been with you.
I think this is entirely honest. This isn't his life. The only question that remains is, what is his life? What does he need to get back to so urgently that he has to give up time traveling? An activity which theoretically gives you all the time in the universe. And what exactly does he mean when he says he has to attack it? It's also crucial to note that he credits the Doctor with being able to return to his old life. So what has he accomplished here that has helped him with doing this. What was Dan's mission from the very beginning? That or the companion just needs to leave the show, so they need to write him out somehow? But really, after everything we've seen, do you really expect me to expect the most mundane answer? There's something more to this. Dan is then absent for the rest of the story pretty much. He does, however, appear at the very end. As the Doctor is regenerating, she got hit by a laser by the way, but Dan wasn't there, so who cares? We see a support group of previous companions gathering together to share stories of the Doctor. In this gathering, there is Ian, one of the first companions of all of Doctor Who, and someone I might just be talking about more in the future. Ian's only line in this entire episode is a response to what Dan says.
But I do miss her.
Sorry. Did you say... her?
Sometimes the Doctor's a man, by the way. I didn't really feel like mentioning that because, again, it really has nothing to do with Dan. Point being, Ian's only interaction here is with Dan. Personally, I think this is symbolism of Ian, the previous best companion of the show, passing the torch to the new best companion of the show. Mind you, this opinion does come from someone who's only halfway through the second Doctor. It is, however, regardless, still the objectively correct opinion. Anyway, that's it. That's pretty much the last we've seen of Dan, for now. If that's even the truth, perhaps we've seen him in a different form. So now, I'll finally try and decipher what exactly Dan is. So who is Dan? There's the obvious culprits, of course. In a show about time-traveling aliens who change their face every once in a while, it's no surprise that a couple of the antagonists are known for popping up out of nowhere, with random, somewhat odd side characters often turning out to be these antagonists. The two I feel like this trope is expected most from are the Master and the Rani. The Master because he's actually done this a couple times. The Rani does this far less, although she has also recently done this exact same thing. The Doctor themselves, for reasons I will not get into in this video, is also liable to be one of these random side characters. But of course, Dan had a very interesting line I pointed out much earlier in this video, which kind of complicates this.
I had a mate who had one of these. I think his was a bit bigger, actually.
Shut up.
He had a friend who had one of these. Now, admittedly, this very offhand line could just be a joke by Dan, but considering, well, everything, I'm going to take it at face value. We've never seen the Master or the Rani with a companion before, so this would be an interesting mix-up. But perhaps that's exactly what they wanted to avoid the Doctor becoming suspicious, especially considering the Time Lords, that's the type of alien the Doctor is by the way, I didn't feel like mentioning it before, have some biological differences with humans, which might come up in adventuring. This, of course, makes it very hard to pin down who he might be, since he could just be some random guy who was trained or hung out with the previous antagonist. Personally, I think two of his most outlandish feats have been him dealing with the Dalek by himself, and him cutting down 5 Sea Warriors at once. The Master could have taught him about Daleks, although I suppose the Rani could have as well, but the Master was also, much like the Doctor, a very skilled swordsman. So perhaps that's where Dan got his skills from. However, then we would have to factor in this line.
Where did you learn to deal with your enemies like that?
You should meet me, Mum.
So he got his swordsman skills from his mum, hey? That seems very unlikely to me. Unless, of course, his mother was the Master. That would explain how she knew part of the official name for the Sontaran weakness. It would also explain her lack of reluctance to let her own son wander into the Sontaran camps by himself. All that said, this theory doesn't really fit in with the rest of that scene.
I'm going in.
By yourself?
Yeah, well, I've had some experience of dealing with aliens these last few days.
The only good reason I could really think of for them speaking like this is the father not being in on it. But then why is he also so suspicious?
Take this, son.
Who has their son, who's entering a highly advanced military base full of aliens, a walk? And why does it work so well?
What is that useless weapon you got?
It's a what?
You look ridiculous.
There is, however, a third time-traveling antagonist that I haven't mentioned yet, the meddling monk. He was a time traveler with the goal of altering time. In his first appearance, his goal was to help the Saxons fend off against the Vikings, to alter English history. Why this alien cares so much about this one specific historical event is never really elaborated on.
Harold. King Harold, I know he'd be a good king. With a few hints and tips from me, they'd be able to have jet airliners by 1320. Shakespeare would be able to put Hamlet on television.
You do what?
The play Hamlet on television.
Oh, yes, quite so. Yes, of course, I do know the medium.
He says all this, but then also claims to have helped build Stonehenge, which I don't really see how that improves anyone's lives, so I just think he's kind of lying.
Doctor, it's more fun my way.
Of course, that story occurs on the east coast of England, whereas Liverpool is on the west coast. However, say you're in the meddling monk's position. At the end of his story, he is stopped by the Doctor by having his TARDIS shrunk, so it's no longer bigger on the inside, and everything that was on the inside is made smaller relative to the outside world. This would have stranded him in that time period, and with the Vikings approaching, heading further west wasn't that bad of an idea. The point I'm trying to make here is, even compared to the Doctor, the meddling monk seems quite obsessed with Britain, almost enough so that they might even adopt a companion with a strange tendency to love a specific city in England. All that said, however, there is one big issue with this theory.
I had to make one of these. I think his was a bit bigger, actually.
Now sure, maybe Dan might have been throwing the Doctor off the scent, or maybe it was a sort of inside joke with multiple layers to it, since Dan himself would have known that the TARDIS his friend had was way smaller. However, I think it's quite clear that his friend's TARDIS was nowhere near as big as the Doctor's. As I've hinted throughout this video, Dan could also just be a god. He wouldn't be the first god the Doctor's contended with, and he'd fit in with the pantheon, the Toymaker, the god of play, Maestro, the god of music, Sutek, the god of death, Dan, the god of Liverpool. It would fit in quite well. However, Dan appears before the Doctor damages the barrier between dimensions, which is why they're dealing with gods in the first place. Although this is a time travel show, so who knows really. Also, honestly, I find this answer the most boring. So there's all my theories. Which one do I think is the actual truth? Bad writing, probably. Yeah, it was just a lie. I kind of just wanted to make up some fun facts about Dan being some kind of god or something. Probably just bad writing, but like, that wouldn't have made a very interesting hour-long video, so what do you want from me? Anyway, hope you enjoyed whatever this was. I plan on making more videos soon, discussing more of the classic era Doctor Who, and maybe some other stuff. I don't know, I haven't really decided yet. Regardless, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching.